and welcome to episode 11 of Tutor Chat. My name is Helen and I'm joined with Lucy here as well.
Hi guys, hello, welcome.
And we are both the sort of lead and main tutors inside the 11 Plus English Club. So what we've decided to do for these next couple of episodes, so at the time of this recording it's September, and we know that lots of students are currently doing their 11 plus exams, but we've also got lots of people who are maybe starting year 4, year 5, and they're kind of in those first stages. You know, I don't know about you, Lucy, but I think we've had so many messages coming through at the moment asking us, like, what is the 11 plus? What is it about? What exam board are we doing?
Yes.
Kind of feeling very overwhelmed, totally confused.
Yes.
So off the back of this, as you can see from today's title, we are doing all about the CSSE exam. So I'm based down in Southend, Lucy's up in Chelmsford, so we kind of cover really two of the main areas of Southend, Essex, where these CSSE exams are. But over the next few weeks, we'll also be doing the same videos for CEM, GL as well. So don't worry if CSSE doesn't apply to you. Just come join us at a later date for the exam board that does. Yes, so what we're going to do, we're going to talk you through basically the structure of the exam. We're going to talk about sort of hints and tips we have for how to pass it, obviously the most important thing. And then at the end, I'm also going to share with you 3, I think, of our best time-saving tips, because that is one of the biggest challenges with the 11 plus. So yes, I'm going to pass you over to Lucy and she's going to tell you all about the exam structure.
Thank you very much, Helen. Beautifully done. So hello guys. So the first thing that I'd like us to discuss is basically the different subjects that we have within the CSSE exam. So it's made up of 2 papers. One is the English paper, the other one is maths, and each of those papers accounts for 50% of your child's overall score. The maths paper is worth 60 marks and your child will have to complete that within 60 minutes. The English is also worth 60 marks. However, there is 10 minutes reading time on top of the usual 60 minutes for the exam. So altogether 1 hour and 10 minutes. The maths is pretty straightforward. It's just as soon as they get told to start, that's it. An hour. English, it's divided into 3 sections. So we have a comprehension section, which Helen's going to talk more about with you. We then have an applied reasoning section, and then followed by a creative writing section. So comprehension, over to Helen to talk more about what's involved.
Yes, thank you. So in terms of the comprehension, first of all, at the beginning of the English exam, you've got 10 minutes reading time. So I think arguably these 10 minutes are some of the most crucial timings in the exam. So during that period, your child is allowed to read the comprehension text, but they're also allowed to read the rest of the questions in the paper. So what we generally recommend is that your child reads the text through to get the sort of main overall understanding, reads through the questions, and then hopefully they're still going to have time left to then go back to the to the text and start looking through and basically planning their answers, because during those 10 minutes they're not allowed to pick up a pen or pencil, they're not allowed to write on the paper. But when they are sort of instructed to start, we want them to hit the ground running and start filling in answers really quickly. So we always recommend sort of trying to plan for those 1 or 2 mark sort of easy mark questions that they can fill in. And also as well, Lucy in a moment is going to talk to you a bit more about the creative writing, but during this same reading time, you can also look at the creative writing tasks as well, which is super important, but I'll leave Lucy to tell you a bit more about that. But in terms of the comprehension questions, so generally in CSSE now, they're all sort of standard format. So that means your child has to like write the answer. There used to be a bit more multiple choice, but I think over the years that's kind of lessened.
Definitely.
One thing to be cautious of that I say to lots of parents is that you can go on CSSE's website and they have like sample papers on there for you. But some of those sample papers, to my knowledge at the time of this recording, the last time I looked on their website, they still have like 2017, 2018 papers on there. Now, from the most recent papers that we've sort of looked at, those 2017, 2018 papers they've got similarities, but for example in those earlier papers they've got these big sections where your child has to write synonyms for words and things like that, and a few years ago that used to be worth like 8, 10, 12 marks. It was a huge chunk of the exam, and up until about a couple of years ago they didn't necessarily include that many marks for those many questions. So I know a few students I worked with a few years ago came out the exam like, Helen, the synonyms weren't there. so it's really, I think that the kind of lesson to be learned from this is that it's really important that these are sort of sample papers. They're not 100% what's going to be in the exam, so you just got to be careful with that. But generally your child is going to be tested on like retrieval skills, inference skills, a bit of an sort of analytical skills as well. And these again are all the kind of English skills that they learn in Key Stage 2 up until the end of Year 6. But I'll be honest, like the way that Lucy and I teach comprehension is we push the kids a bit more into kind of early Key Stage 3 writing. So we go a bit deeper, we look at more challenging texts with them, because ultimately we want your child to be like fully prepared when they go in and they look at that comprehension, and they, you know, we want them to be prepared for any kind of question that gets thrown at them. So yeah, so that is worth 40 marks, and we recommend your child spends maybe about 35 minutes on that section. If they can do it in under 40, that'd be great, because it means they can add time on at the end. So yes, I'll pass you over to Lucy for the next section.
Thank you. So yeah, comprehension is 40 out of 60. So we know that overall the English paper for CSSE is very heavily based on reading, understanding of the text, vocabulary, things like that. The second section is, they call it applied reasoning. It's basically another term for verbal reasoning, and it's worth 5 marks out of 60. So actually it's like 1/12 of the paper if you want to look at it fraction wise. Even though it only accounts for a very small amount of the paper, they are good opportunities to earn extra marks. So a lot of the time your child will be asked to insert the same letter into a gap. It could be inserting a consecutive set of letters into the gap. They also have to rearrange letters in words to come up with their own words within a set of letters. So it's very much based on spelling and also knowledge of the alphabet and being able to recognize patterns. So things that can really help at home are revising spellings, homophones, tricky words. Word games such as Scrabble will really help build a solid foundation of spelling rules as well as vocabulary. So things like that, yes, it's only 5 marks, but ultimately that could be an extra 5 marks, you know, in front of another child, if you want to look at it that way. So yes, so that's your applied reasoning. And then final section of the English paper is creative writing. And this tends to be the tricky one for quite a few children, actually. I think certainly in our experience, Helen, it's always where, you know, children might need the most support really to improve. So it's worth 15 marks out of 60. So it accounts for 1/4 of the paper. And there are 2 separate questions for the creative writing section. Usually, again, we're talking based on previous papers. We can't say what it's going to be like this, you know, this month. At the time of this recording, the CSSE exam is literally this week. So usually each question requires a slightly different set of skills. So one of them will be hypothetical, imagined. They will, you know, draw on your child's imagination, basically, you know, what if you were in this situation, or think about or write about, for example, like a storm or something that, if you were in this situation, if you won the lottery, if you did this, did that. So it's very much imagine skills. And the other question will be slightly more real and based on their actual experience. So write about a time when, or write about your favorite place to visit, or, you know, and in that sense, they will have to think a lot more about, oh, okay, where have I been, or what have I tried out? So always make a plan for both questions, and that ensures that you don't get stuck, basically. And we have a specific concept that we use inside the club, but ultimately a plan, whichever type of plan you're going to use, is going to help your child keep calm, focus, and know where they're heading with their question. It's also going to help them manage their time effectively and think, right, okay, that's my plan for this one. This is how long I've got left. It's always a good practice, really, to have that. And something else that we would mention is CSSE really love for your child to be able to articulate themselves on paper in a really coherent way. And that means that things like SPAG, so spelling, punctuation and grammar, has to be tip top. Also being able to structure their work. So again, this is where the plan comes in and can really help, using paragraphs. So if your child makes a plan and separates that into like paragraph 1, paragraph 2, or paragraph 1, 2, 3, it's still going to be a really good structure for them to utilize alongside their question and answering their questions. So yeah, using paragraphs and always making a plan. Is there anything else, Helen, that you would say?
I think as well, just to add to it, excuse me if you've already said it, I think also timings for this. So like you said, this is something the kids find really difficult. And I think just to emphasize like to families that your child is actually expected to do 10-minute pieces of writing, so 10 minutes for each one. We always joke with the kids, you know, when they do creative writing at school, it's like a week-long activity. You know, Monday we think of ideas, Tuesday we do a plan, Wednesday we do vocabulary, you know, like the whole week sort of is like built around this one piece of creative writing. So when we then say to the kids, actually, no, in your exam, you've got to show off all those skills in 10 minutes, it's quite an overwhelming thing for them to do. You know, they've never done anything like that in school before. And this is where practice is just so important with timings, I think, with the creative writing side. And it sounds crazy that they're being, you know, asked so much in 10 minutes, but it is possible as long as like your child understands what it is the examiner's looking for from them. So yeah, that's really important. So we can also sort of just have a quick chat with you about the maths paper. So a huge disclaimer here that English is our subject, but we do know a bit about the maths, so we thought we'd just tell you a bit more about it as well. Lucy and I both in the past have taught maths for the 11 plus, but over the years we've specialised in English because it's kind of our forte, what we enjoy.
Our forte, yeah.
But yeah, so for the maths, you have 60 minutes, 60 marks. Essentially, your child is being tested on the full Key Stage 2 curriculum of maths. Again, plus maybe a little bit more. So when I say plus a bit more, it could be things like, for example, a bit more difficult ratio, a bit more challenging percentages, things like the nth term and algebra. So those are topics that we would also recommend that you look at, but you can sort of get lists and things of like Key Stage 2 topics to help you work through. But I think one of the most important things with the math side is that, first of all, the questions are a lot more sort of based on like word problems rather than just sort of like pure maths equations that the children are being asked to do. So almost English skills come in here. You know, your child has to be able to sort of read the question properly and like decipher what are the key bits of information they should be using there. In my experience from the past, mental maths is so important. Like things like being able to recall times tables straight away, knowing even just like basic things like number bonds, being able to like add and take away numbers quite quickly in their head is really important. And another thing as well is conversions. So, you know, for example, does your child know that like 3/4 is 75% and 0.75? So that they'll often find questions where maybe it's like mixed decimals, percentages, fractions, things like that. And they might have to kind of convert them all into one to then help them work out the rest of the questions. So those sort of mental math skills are easy things you can drill with your children. Like, you know, you can get maths books. I actually, Exhibit A, have one here. So like this book here, I think is quite good. It's like Word Problems 1. And like on the very first page, there is literally an entire checklist here of like different conversions and things you can practice with your child. So you can kind of start doing that straight away. So that's a really good thing to do. But the questions as well are laid out in a way that often it's sort of like 2 or 3 parts to the question. So that also makes it more difficult, because if your child can't work out A or B, it's probably going to be quite unlikely they can then do C and D, because quite often the answers will filter into each other. So if, for example, your child is doing their maths exam this weekend, you're watching this and it's happening this weekend, you could try little tactics of maybe like getting them to sort of go through, answer all of the A questions first, just to see which ones they can answer. Because again, just like we said with English, timing is a huge thing. So many kids miss out the last few questions of the exam because they just get stuck on one question and they're spending too much time on it. So if we kind of teach the kids tactics to move through the papers as quickly as possible, and again, from the English side of things, we do this in the 11 Plus Club, like we do workshops and things where we show the kids kids specifically how to do timings in the exams. If we can encourage them to move through quickly like that, they're not going to miss out on questions. And I think sometimes there's this perception that the questions get harder as they go, but that's not always the case. Like, I remember back in the day doing like mock maths papers, and I worked with a child and they'd missed out a few questions at the end, and we turned to the last question and they were like head in hands, like, I could do this, I know, I could literally do it in my head, I know the answer to it. So yeah, that's really important for your child, that they don't anticipate that it's going to keep getting harder and harder. Like, encourage them to move really quickly through it.
Yeah, I think for CSSE, as you said, it sort of like trails through, doesn't it? So for an A question, it will be, you know, question 1A. So A will be the easiest, and then A, B, C, D, it will progressively get harder, or we'll be looking at different skills related to that topic. So often it will be question D will be the one where they've either had to work something out in A and B and then have to use that answer, or it will be asking for something just slightly more challenging where they have to, you know, really think about it and dedicate a bit more time to it. So yeah, just see every page of that exam as just a topic, you know, one page based on graphs, one page based on algebra, and just encourage your child to, as soon as they've turned the page, if they've completed it, forget about what they've just done, move on to the next topic. It's just a challenge, you know, each page is a challenge. So yeah, so thank you, Helen, for talking about the maths section. And now we're just going to give you some revision tips, basically. So things that you can work through at home until your exam. Obviously, if you're watching this later on in the year, or whenever you're watching this, these are things that are applicable, okay, for your revision at home. So revising SPAG concepts. So SPAG is spelling, punctuation and grammar. Now, within the exam for English, the comprehension section quite often will have standard format answers, which means your child has to literally write their own answer. They have to articulate it. It's not a checkbox or multiple choice. Your child does actually have an opportunity to earn marks just for accurate spelling, punctuation and grammar. Okay, so a lot of the time the questions say will be worth 2 marks. And you can see this from previous papers and marking schemes. One of those marks will be for content of their answer, what they've actually said, their idea, and the other mark will be for accurate SPAG. So, you know, being able to articulate themselves accurately on paper. So that's definitely something that just revising those things, revising sentences and, you know, grammar and how to start your sentence and punctuation and all of these little things that sometimes can go by the wayside because your child's so focused on, oh, it must be this, it must be that. But actually being able to just write a sentence and remember that they have to use a capital letter and a full stop, or, you know, quotation marks if they're reference into the passage, things like that can really show that actually your child is equipped with, you know, a solid set of skills, and they get credited for it. So when they're being marked, so that's definitely something that's applicable for comprehension. And then obviously creative writing as well, it's completely relevant to that. So I would say revise your SPAG concepts, really make sure that your child feels confident with being able to write. And ultimately, we say this all the time as English teachers, and it's so cliche, but just reading. And it doesn't have to be from a reading list. It can be if your child, you know, wants to explore different authors that are relative to their age. But honestly, any form of reading is better than nothing. So whether it's a newspaper article, or it's a blog, or it's, you know, an actual novel, or it's a science fiction book, it doesn't matter. If your child has that sort of thirst for knowledge and would like to learn about a different subject, allow them to do it, encourage them to do it. And you know, reading accounts for so many different skills. It's like it fills in the gaps sometimes, and it just encourages your child to develop their own level of maturity. And I think sometimes when it comes to 11 plus, a lot of the time their ideas and being able to stand out within their exam comes from that level of maturity. So if they can show that, then, you know, and just through reading and just exploring the world and knowing more about the world and having these mature conversations, then yeah, absolutely, it's going to be a bonus for them. And I think ultimately it's an investment as well for their future. So
100%.
yes.
Okay, fabulous. So just to finish off then, so hopefully, as I say, hopefully you guys have found this helpful with all of our CSSE tips for you here. And if you do have any questions about it, always please make sure you comment on the videos wherever you're watching these, and we're always happy to help any time of year, whenever you're watching. But I guess just a parting note, our 3 sort of main time-saving tips for you really is, we kind of talked about the maths one a little bit already, to be honest. So if it's things like for maths, is preparing your child to have really good mental maths and to kind of go through the paper, doing all the easy questions first. Like, I actually think no matter what exam your child is doing, we should be encouraging that sort of habit mentality in them. Like, break the perfectionism. They don't have to answer every single question straight away. I always say to the kids, it's a game. It's like we're playing a video game, and you've got 60 minutes to collect as many points as possible. Run around the game, collect as many as you can, and then come back and do the difficult ones afterwards. They love it when you gamify things. Makes it so much more relatable for them. The second one is your comprehension. So we mentioned this again as well. The reading time, we feel, is probably one of the most crucial parts of the English exam. Your child in that reading time should be reading the text, making sure that they understand what's going on, reading all the questions and identifying the ones they can answer, and also reading the creative writing tasks. Like, they can be thinking about it in the back of their minds. They can use the comprehension as a bit of inspiration for their writing. And we do this again a lot inside the 11 Plus English Club. We show kids how to make links between a passage and creative writing for themselves. And finally, creative writing. Honestly, so I've tutored 11 plus all the way through to GCSE for a long time, obviously mainly 11 plus now. And the one thing I think I'm going to get tattooed on my forehead is make a plan. Because no matter how old your child is, no matter what piece of writing they're doing, I think we can both instantly tell whether a child has planned a piece of writing or not. You can just see it in the structure of their ideas, the way they've kind of laid things out. So that little tiny investment of time, the kids feel like it's a waste of time. I know they spend hours at school planning, but we teach them ways that they can literally do it in a minute. And that minute is so invaluable to that whole piece of writing. So whether you work with us, whether you're doing this independently at home, either way, still encourage your child to make a plan. So yes, if you do have any questions about this or anything that we've talked about today, then please get in touch with us. All of our contact details are all over social media, but I'll pop them in the links below as well here, just so that you can find them. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in, I believe it's 2 weeks, Lucy, while we're live on Facebook. Yep. So we'll see you in 2 weeks, and we'll be posting our next video all about passing another exam type. Okay, thanks guys, take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.